So on top of sauerkraut, what other kind of stuff? Tell us a little bit about what we have on the table here. We have a lot of different things.
Yeah. So this is actually what you brought. This is your kombucha, right? So this is a fermented tea beverage, and it's been flavored. Back here, we have 3 different kinds of water kefir. And I also have the grains that are sitting here. I can show them to you guys afterwards. They're just a bit dormant now. I gave them some
water
food.
kefir makes like almost like a soda flavor. Is that what?
Yeah. So it has a sour flavor, and so it tends to go with things that are sour. It goes really nice with lemon. I made a lemon one for you guys. It goes really nicely with grape juice, raspberries, and things like that.
So it's going to be a sweet and sour, tangy, almost soda pop-like, because all the fermented stuff gets a little fizzy.
Yes. And so if you were to use a container, like a bottle that is airproof and cap it after the fermentation period, you can actually make it to be like a carbonated drink. You can make it bubbly and fizzy, but it's a probiotic soda suddenly. So, you know, it's a good way to trick your kids into getting some of these.
Exactly, for those that have
thinking
kids.
they're drinking pop.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have your regular run-of-the-mill sour pickles. Very simple to make as well. So, what else is here? I made some salsa for you guys with some nice jalapenos for whoever likes it spicy. There's 2 kinds of sauerkraut here. The regular one with caraway, the one that is like the original, everybody knows that kind. And then I used some red cabbage, and I threw in a bunch of other veggies like onions and carrots, and you can throw in different spices and herbs to flavor it. I also made, for the first time actually, and it turned out quite well, a fruit kimchi. So, believe it or not, it's sweet even though I use salt to ferment it. So you'll see what that tastes like later on. Back here we have some coconut milk yogurt, and we also have coconut milk kefir. And somebody actually also brought in some Polish borscht to share with the group.
So the coconut milk yogurts are made with?
These are actually made with a probiotic packet that I take. You can make them with probiotic pills, you can make them with yogurt starters, or you can make them with whey from a yogurt that you've dripped yourself. It's whatever you have available, whatever you want to use, it'll work.
Okay, so if you can do all this. Now, what can't you ferment? Because it looks like you can do just about anything: fruit, vegetable, dairy.
Right.
I understand even cheese is a fermented thing.
Right.
Sausages are a fermented, dried.
In fact, you can ferment almost anything. You can ferment meat, like you just said. That's not something I've dabbled with, but you can ferment meat if you want to. I think the limit stops at food that's dead, food that doesn't have any nutrition to give because it won't feed the bacteria, and food that doesn't have any bacteria to begin with. Like, you know, I'll wash the cabbage, but I'm not going to scrub it and sterilize it and boil it because it won't ferment. Like, you need to keep the bacteria that's already on it. So if you were to use something that's very processed food, it won't really ferment.
So I guess you would only want to ferment like organic cabbage probably, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Organic cabbage, organic lemons, because you can imagine all of that is going to be drawn out, and the bacteria is not going to live as well. And especially when you're thinking about things like the kefirs and the kombuchas, your cultures are going to be affected because you tend to reuse those cultures.
What about the milk that you would use for the kefir, for instance, that raw milk? Was it possible to find? What do you use pasteurized milk from your store? Or?
Yeah, raw milk, of course, is the best because it hasn't been tampered with. You know, the enzymes haven't been cooked, you know, at 170 to 190 degrees. You know, it's got everything, everything's live. So that's the best medium. But you're right, you know, it's illegal in Canada to purchase that, which puts us at a disadvantage kind of thing.
Makes it very hard to get access to.
But the organic milks, even if they're pasteurized, as long as they're whole fat and, you know, they haven't been tampered with other than the pasteurizing.
I have made homemade yogurt with ordinary, homogenized, full-fat milk from the grocery store, and it has come out great. I mean, obviously, it's not as nice as an organic milk or using, or a raw milk. It's not as good, but it can be done.
But you
Can't
not
help.
gonna propagate it forever, right? At some point, you take a little part of your work to do the next batch,
Yep,
Eventually,
it hasn't failed on me yet.
you
Yeah.
got
I've
the
been
same
able to
original
take a
batch
little bit
for
each time out
how
of a new
long
batch.
did you, for how long did you propagate that batch for?
How long did you keep?
Keep going.
Yeah.
I did about 6 batches in a row, and then I had to stop. Just because when you buy homogenized milk, the size of the container that you get, you know, what is that, the 4-liter size
Oh, yeah, okay.
in a carton,
Mhm.
that makes about 3 yogurt containers the size you buy in the store. And there's 4 people in my family, and it got to the point where I had 8 of these things in the fridge, and I had to keep making it because you need fresh cultures when you make the yogurt, but there were so many we couldn't possibly eat them before they were going to go bad because they were fresh and there were no preservatives in them. So I just stopped, and I haven't restarted on it. But it never at any point died or failed to make the next batch.
It's the same for the kefir. The kefir would survive the milk commercial.
The kefir, there's a restaurant in New York that has kefir that's close to 1,000 years old, and it's in a restaurant setting, so they use it a lot.
I mean, if you're going to use milk kefir grains, the point is if you take them out of the milk and you put them into coconut because it's not milk, they'll eventually starve. So every 2 or 3 batches you have to put them back into the milk to revive them
Yeah,
and bring them
and-
back, and then you can go again.
And you'll notice they become plump and, you know, fatter kind of thing. They're happy kind of thing, and they will propagate in a larger colony. So then you can start another batch or give them to people who want to.
The thing that I mostly use for them is a mix of dextrose, which is a disaccharide of glucose. That's just what I have in the house. I tend to consume that more. It's organic. But they also need minerals. So you need a brown sugar and unrefined sugar.
Molasses.
You can use molasses. I tend to use dried fruit. There's dates in here right now. And I do a mix, half and half, or more white sugar or less. They tend to do well on a mix of both white sugar and brown sugar. That's just what tends to work for them. You can always revive them as well. If they're starting to kind of look like they're dying off a little bit, you can throw in a little bit of sea salt. Again, it's full of minerals, you can tell, because they thrive. You can throw in a little bit of baking soda. You can throw in, if you've boiled an egg, and you know that cleans the shell very well, you can use the shell and throw it in there, and they'll disintegrate a little bit and suck the minerals out of it. Yeah, so you can always, there's always troubleshooting steps you can take to revive your colonies a bit.
You almost have to be emotionally feel.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty funny.
That
They become
symbiotic
like,
relationship.
exactly. They're all on my
Like a baby
counter.
almost.
Yeah, and they're like my little pets. It's very nerdy, but I have little probiotic pets. I have to remember to feed them and change the water. And it's been 2 days. It's been a week. Okay, you guys need more food, and
It
you know
becomes
they're
mad
alive.
science in
Yeah.
a corner of your kitchen. You're constantly tampering with, because it's not an exact science. You can do.
Exactly.
There's a lot of room for flexibility and try different things. And
they're quite adaptable as well. You know, so they'll survive through a lot of things. Yes.
So you can take the existing kefir probiotics from the store, like they have a fermented one, and just use that.
As far as I understand, there are powders you can buy, but I haven't heard that you're able to just use that culture to start your own, because it
I think the
Is that
powders
true?
are one-time use.
are
Yeah, that's
one-time
right.
use, and they're probably just a dried down version of an existing very strong kefir, right? So I think the best thing to do is to have the actual grains, and they'll keep producing for you.
Now there is a water kefir grain and a milk kefir grain.
You can't really tell right now. This looks a lot like cottage cheese, and when you guys come up here and look at this looks like like cubes of like tapioca. You know when you go and you get bubble tea and you get those tapioca pearls and the jelly? They look more like the jelly actually. So they look slightly different, and they obviously function in different mediums.
Okay,
So-
the next thing we'll do is we'll
Yeah,
show them
I
how to
was
make
actually
the
gonna
easiest
show you.
ferment.
Very quickly how I make my sauerkraut. So there's actually 2 ways, and these books talk about fermenting veggies differently. So the main difference is This book is a big advocate of not covering up, not air sealing your ferments while they're fermenting. He says you should just have gauze or something to keep out flies and dirt, and then let the bacteria, the yeast that are present in our air, go in and culture it. Now, this book, Nourishing Traditions, is a fan of trying to air seal your cultures. That's the technique that I use, and I have very few problems with mold that way. It still works because, again, I haven't sterilized the cabbage. There's bacteria present on it. So even though I put it in there and I seal it, it's still going to grow whatever's, on my cabbage.
But what you mean, you see it's just totally closed?
Exactly.
There's no airflow?
No
whatsoever?
airflow. Because if you think about it, when you have your cabbage in here and you cover it in saltwater brine, it's actually an anaerobic environment. You have no oxygen. These bacteria, they don't need oxygen to live. They're the opposite. There's no oxygen in our colon. So that's what we're creating for them anyway. That's why when they're submerged in the water, that's when they thrive. And you have mold on top, but mold is the one that needs air, right? So technically when I cover it, when I put my sauerkraut in here and I cover it, I reduce the amount of mold that could technically come in from the air. And I've noticed that less mold tends to grow, if none at all. Like both of these you can check, and I open them every few days to see how they smell, how the taste is. There's no mold that's grown on them, but they're still fermented.
But there's a bit of a gap that you...
Yes, I always leave a gap, and after 2 days I always burp the jars. So I open them and I let the gases out.
You don't open like this, you just open it just...
I open it like this. You can open like this if you want, and you can take a forkful.
You can taste it at any
And-
point. It's not
exactly.
unsafe to eat.
Yep, and then decide if you're ready to put it in your fridge or if you want it to ferment longer.
But how many days it...
This one has fermented for a week, and this one has fermented for 2 weeks.
And how long, after 2 weeks nowadays it's done?
It's normally done depending, again, on the quantity that you're fermenting. If I'm
It depends
fermenting,
on how sour you want it, how soft you want it. The longer it ferments, the softer and mushier the cabbage is going to become.
and
It's
very,
going to
very
be less
sour.
salty and more vinegary tasting the longer it sits. So if you want it still a little bit crunchy, a little bit squeaky to the tooth, you like that salty taste, then after a week you're good. Some people do leave it up to 6 weeks.
Right.
But I do like the pickle jars because they do allow for the escape of the carbon dioxide buildup from the jar, increasing the work of the bacteria. So it does increase the amount of